If you're an online business owner, you have a website. If you have a website, you're probably collecting data on people. If you're probably collecting data on people, you need a privacy policy. In fact, you're probably breaking the law if your website does not have a privacy policy. And if that doesn't scare you, well, I can't help you. If that scares you a little bit because you're like, oops, I don't have one, there's a couple of ways that you can solve this problem very easily. I've been using Termageddon for the past year, and I've found some tips and tricks along the way that I think will really help you when you start using it for your privacy policy, cookies management, all the legal stuff on your website. I wouldn't say it's super intuitive if you've never done something like this before, so I wanted to jump into my account and show you some of the tips and tricks that I've learned in case you're new to the game, or if you're in the first year and you haven't figured out these best practices yet. Because again, not super intuitive, but easy to figure out once you know what to do with them, right? Before I actually dive in, if you're coming back, welcome. If you're new around here, my name is Caitlin. I run Launch the Damn Thing. I'm a Squarespace web designer, and I love to share the tools and best tips and practices like today's with you because, you know, it's nice to talk to people who give a shit about what you're talking about. And that's why you're here, right? On that note, let's dive into my account and I'll show you what I'm talking about. One is to go to a template shop, buy a template. Edit the template download that you get. Usually it's a doc, Word doc in some form, a Google Doc, that kind of thing. Download the thing, edit where they tell you to edit. There are always like highlighted text areas that they are saying, this is the part that's okay to change. So make your edits, copy the whole doc, go onto your website, create a new page, paste it in, save the change. That's it. The downside to this method, specifically for privacy policies, is that they don't keep up with changes in the laws. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of those right now. So this used to be my method of choice pre-2021. However, in 2021 and increasingly in 2022, and now very much in 2023, new privacy laws are being introduced all the time. So if you want to be able to keep up with that and make sure your website stays on the legal up and up, I definitely recommend that you use something different than a templated document that requires manual edits. Because I don't know about you, but I'm not reading bills that are changing for this kind of thing. So I don't know when these laws are changing, which also means I don't know when I'm supposed to update my privacy policy unless somehow I get notified in my inbox from someone that I trust. So if that's you and you're like, yeah, I'm not really doing any of that either. What you need to do is to search for something like Termageddon, spelled kind of like Armageddon, but with TERM at the front of it. There's also other tools like Benda, Termly, TermsFeed. There's a few of them out there. The one that I chose to use is Termageddon. One, because I really dislike their branding. Two, it seems like a smaller-ish company because I've been in touch with the bigwigs a couple of times and they're really cool people. So I really like the company. I like how they handle things. And also they're one of the ones that basically send you a questionnaire to fill out. You answer a bunch of questions. They take your answers, plug them into an actual policy that makes sense, becomes compliant with the law, and you embed that privacy policy on your website. And then as the laws change, Termageddon goes through the privacy policy pieces outside of the answers that you gave them in that questionnaire and keeps it up to date. They also email you and let you know when there are new questions based on additional laws. What that means is in 2023, there was a bunch of new ones in the US. So I got an email that said, hey, there's some more questions we need you to answer, and then we'll update the privacy policy that's already on your website. Super easy to manage it that way. But that comes with a couple of caveats in that the privacy policy that they put on your website is linked to their cookie consent tool, which means you also have to install that. In order to install that without creating some adjacent issues like potentially blocking third-party applications or widgets that you've embedded in your website, like YouTube videos, Vimeo videos, forms, schedulers from Calendly or Acuity and those kinds of things. You also have like extra steps in the installation only to make sure they are still displayed to the people coming to your website. So it's a little bit of legwork at the beginning, but you do all of that kind of work up front so that you have less work in the long term. And that is definitely worth the effort. That was the really long, boring way of saying, I'm going to show you quick tips that I have learned over the process of doing this, not only for myself on my own website, but several of my clients' websites since I started using TERMAGEDDON last year. So I've done this lots of times. I'm a lot more familiar with the process. I understand more about what I'm doing, and I wanted to give you that knowledge as best as I possibly can. I also want to point out too, if you ever have any questions, the guys on the TERMAGEDDON staff, they're fantastic. Reach out to them with your questions and ask. They're happy to help you. Just pointing that out. Let's hop on into my account so I can show you what I have learned. From your dashboard, when you first create your TERMAGEDDON account, you're going to have a blank slate in here where it says assign license. You'd start with that. If you've never done anything with TERMAGEDDON before, you need to say whatever license I just purchased, that's the one that I'm going to put all the policies in or attach them to. My policies are attached to my Launch the Damn Thing business, so I'm going to click on that now, but you would assign a license. Right now I am at 1 out of 1 licenses used, so I can't show you that. If you wanted to add additional licenses, for example, if you had multiple businesses and you wanted to use TERMAGEDDON for all of them, just click on assign license and start going through the prompts, follow the steps, right? So I'm going to click into my account. From here, you have probably a blank area down here with one box that says add a policy. You get up to, I think, 5 total policy types with 1 license. So with the 1 license that I have, I can use it for my privacy policy, my cookie policy and consent tool, and my disclaimer, and I could also use it for my terms of service, also referred to as terms and conditions. And if you have some sort of licensing with whatever you're selling, like a software, the end user license agreement is what that stands for, EULA. I don't need that in my business, but you might. So that's what your options are. You'll have those 2 buttons plus the other 3 that I'm already using from that box. So click to add a policy once you're in here and pick the one that you want to start with. The terms of service, if you're wondering why I'm not using that in TERMAGEDDON, I already had a policy for that, and that's not one of those things that changes very frequently. So I'm just going to keep using the one that I got from Creative Law Shop. What I recommend is to start with a privacy policy. Let's just do terms of service actually, so I can show you sort of what the steps look like. What they do is they ask you a question, you give it an answer, and then you click next. It asks you a lot more questions, you give it some answers, and you click next. Go through all of the cycles, submit. That's what you would do in your privacy policy. I'm not going to open that because it has questions per page in multiple stages for each policy. It is a lot. It's going to feel like a lot. It's going to ask you things that you've never thought you would be asked. Once you do the initial legwork, though, it's kind of a static thing because TERMAGEDDON will update as much as it possibly can for you based on the initial answers you gave it in the questionnaire. So fill it out to the best of your knowledge. If you ever have a question, there's little question marks at the end of every question. Click on that. It will take you to the help desk where it explains the question a bit more. If you still have questions, reach out to the support at TERMAGEDDON. You can ask them. They are a great team of people that are always eager and happy to help. Once you get your privacy policy done, you want to click on View Embed Code. Now from this window, you are looking at your actual embed code, but before you grab that, you can click Advanced over here on the right, and then click on any of the checkboxes you want to turn on that will tweak how the embed code applies on your website. So for example, I want the policy to hide the title because I want control over that. So I hide the TERMAGEDDON policy title so I can use my own. I also want to use accordions instead of tables because I think that's more user-friendly to collapse or expand at will. And I also want to use H3 tags instead of H2 for those titles throughout the whole policy because they're smaller. And I also want to left align instead of center aligning the titles because that's just my personal preference. I also want to hyperlink all of the emails in the privacy policy so that they are clickable. I also want to keep compatibility mode on. So I prefer to check all of the boxes. Once I have done that, then I copy the code. So copy the code here, go into your website. I keep my legal policies inside a portfolio collection because this allows me to house all of the policies in one page. That's this page, where these are sub pages and they all have their little like pagination at the bottom. That's automatic. So I don't have to do that. That's just fewer steps for me. So I have a blank page. You can create that, put it in here. On the privacy policy page, I go into edit mode, and you'll notice when I actually go into edit mode, I can't actually edit the code or the policy from here. And that's because it's managed over in Termageddon. It just displays here in a third-party widget, which is a code embed. So if I click on that, I can paste the Termageddon thing here, or I could alternatively do an embed block, then click code snippet, embed data, click in here and paste in the code that way. Either way, they are an embedded script. And as you saw, if we exit out of that, it will load the entire policy in that spot. And this works in Fluid Engine, also works in Classic Editor. It doesn't matter what version of Squarespace you're using. So you'll notice that the last updated timestamp has been updated because I did that in Termageddon. So it updated every time you go into your Termageddon and click edit policy details. It will automatically reflect the time and date that you edited the policy itself. This is what the accordions look like. I did some custom CSS on this, so I added the little drop-down icon indicator here. I don't think that's standard. This is something that I changed in CSS also. So if I can track down that CSS that I used for mine, I will put that in the blog post. The link for that will be in the description below this video. So you can grab and cut and paste that. As you can see, the emails are hyperlinked and everything is pretty well organized and simple. So what this does is keeps your like legalese editing over in Termageddon land. It just displays the updates to that and the policy in full on your website. Whew, that felt like a lot, I'm sure. So let's take a pause for a minute, absorb that, and give you a second to get up, walk around, come back. Are we ready to jump in? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? I know you're like super excited about this. If you get confused, go back to your dashboard, click on your license again to get back inside that area. That's your policies in the drop down like side over here. You also have all of your policies listed, the ones that you've created and the available options that you haven't started editing or saving or whatever over here too. If you started with privacy policy, then I would start second with your cookie policy and consent tool. What that is, this little bugger right here, this little pop-up thing, whether it's across the bottom as a bar or a pop-up modal in the middle, doesn't matter, same thing. This is basically just asking the user who visits your, do you want to allow all the third-party services that I use for marketing, that I use for functional purposes, and then you cannot deselect or deny essential cookies that are related to running the website. So that one's grayed out, but these two, you can do it once and it checks every box for that category. Same thing for this one. Or users can check the little toggle here and individually decide which of these things am I going to allow or disallow for my computer to track related to my use of this website. So that's what this actually is, the cookie consent tool. And this combines all of the stuff that I'm about to show you over in Termageddon. So let's hop on over to that. Now, if we click on the edit policy details, this one I actually am going to go on the inside. I'm just going to put that out there. No, I am not an attorney, so this is not legal advice, but I'm just going to tell you, most likely you're required to have a privacy policy. So on the cookie policy, which is part of privacy, right? Because we're allowing the user to decide what they will accept tracking on and what they will not. So when you come into the edit policy details, you get control of the appearance. What is the main call to action color going to be? You can select that based on your brand. You can also choose to use the fingerprint icon, which is quite large. It's like, if you're in the US, it's about the size of a dime, maybe even a nickel. It's fairly large, and I don't think there is granular control over how that looks. So I choose to do the privacy settings hyperlink instead. That way I decide what it looks like, which is why on my website, to trigger that pop-up, it has a button here that I have styled with CSS. And I put that button in multiple places. So it doesn't live as like a permanent icon down here, that I have other things that live down there, as you can see. First layer appearance for GDPR is going to pop up in the center. And for the second layer appearance, basically what it's asking me is, how do I want to display cookie consent for all these different use cases? And unfortunately, these are all different laws in different countries, so it has to ask this multiple times. What I suggest is to go through this and keep them consistent, so that things aren't popping up from different directions while they come to your website. Let's keep them in the same spots. If you like the banner, use the banner for everything. If you like the center pop-up, use the center pop-up for everything. So let's do wall, center, wall, center. There we go. Okay, so click next. You can edit this if you want to. I'm going to leave it alone. A lot of that was default. Make sure you answer all the questions. Now, domain settings. This is going to be interesting depending on how many domains you have and how many subdomains you have. I have a lot, so I put them all in here. The privacy policy URL is going to be whatever the privacy link is of this page. Whether it's a single page or in a collection, you just grab the whole link, and this is after your domain. So for me, that's launchthedamnthing.com/legal/privacy. That's the full link. So I put that here. Then we're going to click next. We can decide what the buttons say. I left that as default. Now, when we get to the scan portion of your website, starting with this, you can't scan a website that is not public, which means if you're still on a trial, you have to wait till you publish the website and then come in here and do this, because it can't see your website if it's in password protected mode. For Squarespace, if you know anything about how that works, on websites that are not published, if you go into settings, site availability, you can set the password for the website so that you can share the website draft with a client and then just give them that password. That's not the login password, that's just the view password for this particular website. If you do that though, and it's not public, Termageddon can't see what's on the inside of the website because it has no way to put in a password. So your website does need to be public in order to run the scan. I highly encourage you to run the scan because it will pick up things like JavaScript, Google Ajax, jQuery, Google Fonts, Adobe Fonts, things that you would have forgotten to put in here because you just don't think on that level. You're not a computer engineer, and I'm not either. So publish it. And then as soon as you do that, run over to Termageddon, go to your cookie policy and consent tool, edit policy details, cycle through all of the options, and then when you get to the scan page, you put in your sitemap. For Squarespace, they generate the sitemap for you automatically. All you have to do is knowyourdomain.com/sitemap.xml. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know what it looks like. You don't need to know what it does. Just know that's your sitemap. You put in the full link and then you click Run Scan. I'm going to do that because it takes a minute. Is the scanned URL a sitemap URL? In this case, yes, that is it. So I selected yes. Give it a few minutes to run the scan. While we're waiting on that, what it's actually doing is scanning the code of my entire website, looking for third parties that have tracking tools in it. It's not 100% perfect, but it'll get you probably 90% of the way there. You might have to think a little bit extra outside the box. And one of the ones that it's not going to catch is Squarespace. And you're probably like, Squarespace is not a third party on my website. No, but their analytics tracking is, because Termageddon is managing your cookies now instead of Squarespace cookies and visitor data. So if we're not managing it here, and make sure that disable Squarespace analytics cookies is off, because we're not going to manage cookies here. We're not going to let our viewers manage cookies with Squarespace's interface. We want viewers to manage that in Termageddon. When it's done scanning my website, oh, there we go. When it's done scanning, you look through the list, look to see if you recognize most of these things. Cloudflare will be something that Squarespace uses, I think, for video hosting. So look for things that do or don't make sense to you. Cloudflare is usually a safe one. Vimeo, that's for third-party videos. Pinterest, Google Analytics. I have my Google Analytics 4 ID number in my settings. Amazon Web Services. I am an affiliate, so I have Amazon linked up with my website. YouTube video, yes, that's right. Airtable, I have things embedded. That's right. Squarespace probably won't be on your list, but here's how to add it. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of this thing, you click on Add New Service. While it says loading services, you can't click on this yet, so just give it maybe like 60 seconds. I know, it takes a long time, but it's looking through a lot of things. So once that finally stops, you can click on the drop down and just start typing to filter through the list. When you start typing Squarespace, you'll find it here, and then you click Add Service. The reason you want to find it predefined like this in a dropdown is because it already knows what those settings are for Squarespace. So for example, if I scroll back up and click Edit, over here, it's already answered all of these questions for you. And there are a lot of them that you probably don't know. For example, what's the service name? Squarespace. What's the description? Well, I don't know. Choose the category. Is it marketing? Probably. I don't know though. Data. What is the purpose of the data collection? Where do they process the data? You're not going to know the answers to a lot of these questions. So anytime you add a third-party service to your website, ideally, you come back into the cookie consent generator thingy that we're here in, run the scan to see if it picks it up for you, because if it doesn't, you have to go in there and answer those questions, because this is what shows up here and tells people what this service actually is, what it does. Here's where you can find their privacy policy. I know, I'm sure you're just dying to go read about everybody's privacy policy. What is my privacy policy and Squarespace's privacy policy? And wherever they store their information, I'm sure they have a privacy policy too. So this is how it works. So once you have added everything you can possibly think of, and make sure you're putting in your scheduler, anything related to video, Facebook if you're embedding Facebook feeds, Instagram if you're embedding Instagram feeds. Once you're done, click Submit. Now when you click Submit, you go through the same process we just did with the privacy policy. Again with the advanced, because this is going to show up in the same way. So I check all the boxes, then I copy the embed code. I come back over to my website, and I have another page separately for the cookie consent tool. Now, I'm a little bit over the top, as usual. So I have the change my privacy settings code button that it gives you elsewhere in your Termageddon account. I pasted that in. I styled it with CSS so people can see this policy and change their privacy settings from here if they want to. I also have this bit about what to expect with the cookie consent tool, because God forbid if I forget something and it shows up with this little pop-up thing that is partially branded where it's like, oops, we need your consent to load this thing. That's where they can accept or add more information. So what happens is, if I scan my website and apply everything in that list that we were just on and say, this is everything I can think of, and then if a viewer comes to something that is not on that list, but collects some version of analytics. For example, this happened when I added Vimeo videos to my website and it wasn't in my TERMAGEDDON app. It had this little thing that was like, oops, you didn't agree to this before, but it's available now. So do you want to accept this now? That's what that little pop-up is. This is me explaining that and what it looks like. And also I'm saying like, hey, if you ever want to adjust your preferences, you can do that. This is on a per user basis. I tell them where to go and what to click on. So that is the cookie consent tool. I just want to reiterate, I have a cookies policy. I also have a separate page for what to do with that tool because it works a little bit differently than most people probably expect. The policy itself lives on this separate page, and that is what what's the cookie consent tool. That's what that button goes to, this other page right here. So I took that Termageddon code right here, and on the page for cookie policy, separate from the cookie consent tool, I click on edit. I put in my own title, I put the button again, what the cookie consent tool, blah, 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 that button I just made with the normal interface, and an embed block where I put in the code and saved my changes, end of story. So the biggest takeaway here that I want you to know is when you go through and do your privacy policy, there's going to be a lot of questions that you didn't even know that it was going to ask. You never even would have dreamed that I was going to ask. And that's because there are laws popping up left and right. I think in 2023 in January, we were warned about six new laws, just because it's now like state by state. So eventually there will probably be 50. That's just for the US alone. That does not include all of the other countries that are doing the same thing with maybe different provinces within their own country. So expect this to see significant changes in the coming future, which is why I suggest using something like Termageddon or IUBenda or Termly or TermSpeed or whatever other software that does something basically the same. That's saving you lots of time and headache. So start with your privacy policy because cookies is like an adjacent piece of that. So start with privacy, then do cookie policy. Your cookie consent tool is looped in with that, which is why it says both there in the title. And once you've got those two done and installed on your website, then I would worry about your disclaimer if you want to do that, and your terms of service and your end user license agreement if you want to. Now, let's say you've got all this in here a year or so from now, you have some changes, you can always do that, right? You saw that I'm in my own account. You can edit your policy details. You can override your policy at some point. Again, if you have any questions, reach out to Team Termageddon. They're super helpful individuals that want to help you, and they can answer a lot of your like vague legal term questions. If you have no idea what it's asking you, they can usually give you some indication of like what they're actually saying, so you know how to answer the question. But they can't answer questions for you. They may not even work in your country. That's why I gave you lots of suggestions. Termageddon works for me in the US. It may not work for everybody, so just find the tool that you think will work to the best of your knowledge. Once you've answered all those questions, set up all the policies that you want to, and you're ready to install the actual module on your website, make sure everything is working. There's a couple of extra steps. First and foremost, the cookie policy and consent tool does require extra bits of code for that to function, especially if you choose to use the customized button option instead of the fingerprint icon, which is the little thing that lives in one of the corners of your website. So I want to show you how I installed mine. Then I click on cookie policy and consent tool, click on view embed code, and you'll notice there's more codes here. So let's explain what each of these is. The cookie policy embedding instructions, this is the policy itself. See where it says ID policy? That means this is the code that belongs on your actual policy page, which is what makes up that thing right there. So that goes on the policy page, the one that you're going to display the policy on. If we go back to your policy details for the cookie policy and consent tool, the next one down is the user-centric cookie consent tool. which is the company that actually developed this in partnership with Termageddon. This is the code that actually puts on your website the third-party functionality for that pop-up to change my privacy settings. So copy all of it. Now, read the instructions here. It says copy the code below and paste it into the header section of your website's source code. I know that sounds scary, but in Squarespace, it's not. Go into your Squarespace account, go into Settings, Advanced, Code Injection. Squarespace is changing the layout of settings, so that may look a little bit different for you. In the header, that is this section of the code. So if you scroll down, you'll see the header section and also the footer section. You don't want the footer. The sections beneath that are your lock screen, and you don't need that either. So you're just talking about the very top of your code injection area where it says header. Paste in or copy in that whole snippet, which should look something like that. If you want to put a little disclaimer in here that is not code that tells you what the code is after that, this little snippet in the same way that I did, again, I'll try to put that in the blog post there and just paste in your code in between the two little notes. That essentially tells you anything in gray is not code actually, it's just a note in the code and doesn't mess with the function of the code itself. So you paste that in, save your change, and then after you've saved your change, the functionality will be there. We just need to paste in the link. So the third piece of this is the user-centric policy settings link. And this is the link that creates like a text link, basically. So if you copy that, go into your settings, go into the page where you want that to live, click on embed, and then on your code snippet, embed data, paste. Now we have privacy settings. Now, full disclosure, yours won't look like that. Most likely it'll be text with no background color and whatever your default font is, whatever your default font color is. You can style that with CSS though, and I will give you the code snippet for that. But that is how you install the actual button. What I suggest for you to install the button is to put it in your footer somewhere where people can access it easily. For me, that was at the bottom of my footer, near where all the other legal shit is. For you, that can be wherever you feel like people are going to see it most or need it most. You don't need to put it in your top header nav. All this stuff right here, this is not for that kind of thing. But I definitely encourage you to put it in your footer. The reason being is that the law says this needs to be accessible from every page of your site. The only two areas you can do that is in your footer or in your header. And because it's not on the equivalent level of introducing my services page or my blog page to people, for that reason, I put it in my footer. So it is available from every page of my website, but it's down here at the bottom with all the other legal stuff. So I have this button in several places. I put it in my footer, yes, but I also put it on the legal page right here. And the learn more about what that tool is right here. And then from that, I have it here. And on my cookies page, I have it here. It's all the same link. It's all the same button. It's just showing up in lots of different places, but I chose to do that manually because I wanted people to have access to it from multiple different points. It's also on my privacy page, I think. Yes. So you can choose where to put it, and that's why I preferred that option as opposed to the fingerprint icon because it just lives taking up lots of extra space down here in the corner. It's a rather large icon. So that's all of my tips and tricks for Termageddon. It's a lot, I understand. However, it's one of those things where you do all the legwork up front and it keeps working for you into the future. So it is actually a time efficient option, especially if you are not an attorney, you're not reading every bill that's introduced around privacy laws in your country, which I assume you're not because they are large, multi-hundred page documents. And yeah, if that's not you, then you need something to help you keep up with that stuff. So on that note, I definitely encourage you to try out Termageddon. That's my favorite thing to use. I really like the company. I got a free hat out of the deal when I first signed up. They're great for designers. If you want to use them for your clients, they're super helpful. You can join their affiliate program and get recurring commission on any referral that you get through your affiliate link. So that's awesome. And of course, if you use my affiliate link, you can get 10% off your first purchase. And it's really affordable option that keeps you compliant with privacy laws in your country. So, I mean, you can't really go wrong with that, right? So that's everything that I know. Again, I'm not an attorney, so this is not legal advice. I do encourage you to do your own due diligence and see what's necessary for the laws in your country if you have an online business, because there are hidden barriers to being legally compliant for something like that. So do your own research, ask them lots of questions. When I got first set up with them, I booked an appointment. I talked to a human being. I asked them lots of questions. And they will certainly do that with you too. So that's it. I know this was a boring topic, so I'm going to sign off. Go investigate it for yourself. I hope this video has helped you today. If you want the code snippets that I can share with you around customizing, go check out the blog through the link in the description below and grab the code snippets from over there. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.